extensive network of sustainability experts and advisors during her tenure at NIKE and remains committed to the power of networks as a way to transform our future. Sarah chose to move up to San Juan Island. She has felt drawn to this place ever since first moving from the Netherlands to Portland, Oregon. There is something about island life and the proximity to the water that brings her back full circle to her British roots. Currently, she is on the steering committee of the Islands Climate Resiliency Group. So let's welcome Sarah.
Thank you, everybody, and I want to thank Claire and Anne for organising this and coaxing me into doing this talk. And now we have to hope that the technology works, which is not necessarily guaranteed, but we tested it before lunch. Yes, it works. Yeah, I think you're right. I'm more worried about whether I need to switch this on or not.
Okay, is that better, everybody? I'm competing with a fairly raucous group next door. Slowly. It's just warming up. Okay, great. So I'm probably going to be dancing around a little because I have to push the buttons on this and I'll be talking and referring perhaps to some notes that I have. But as Claire was saying, you know, I worked on this issue because I joined Nike in 93, I moved to Portland in 95, and very, very soon after that, there was a major issue with one of Nike's products. Any of you that have ever worn a Nike sneaker will know that there's an airbag often that provides the cushioning in the sole. And it turned out that that airbag had a very, very powerful greenhouse gas in it. So powerful, 23,000 times more powerful than CO2 as a global warming gas. And when we added up the number of shoes we were selling every year and multiplied it by that factor, we came up with a figure close to 7 million metric tons, which is about the size of a small power station in terms of its CO2 impact. So we kind of had to galvanize the business into finding a solution and replacing that with a less harmful gas. And the problem was that anything other than that would leak out through the membrane, because the thing about what makes gases, global warming gases, is the size of the molecule. And this was a very big molecule. And so it made it really good for the purpose of being in a shoe in an airbag. Anyway, to cut a long story short, it took 10 years of R&D to finally phase that gas out. And what they did is, they did it by innovating the film. And then they could just put nitrogen in the airbags. And so that took a lot of pressure, obviously, off the company. And I think, you know, one of the things to think about is at that time, many of you may remember, Nike was in the media a lot because of labor practices issues. And so when I was heading up the environmental team, I said, you know, I really don't want the company to be a pariah on this as well as on labor practices. You know, one issue is enough. And I think the lesson from that, and the reason I'm telling you, is that even when things look really bad, you think you're not going to be able to find a solution. When you put constraints on a system, innovation happens. And the result of that R&D project was actually a whole line of footwear that would never have been developed if they had not had that constraint in the first place. And I think it's a useful metaphor really for what we're facing globally on climate change. You know, there's a group of people that say we can't possibly do the things we do day to day without the use of fossil fuels. Well, that's absolutely not true. There are hundreds, literally hundreds of innovations out there and things that we can do, and we can replace them, and this is a solvable problem. The thing that has been lacking is political will and a certain amount of investment. And I mean investment on a really big scale, you know, by governments and that kind of thing. So that's how I approach this particular problem. But now I'm going to try and bring it back down to what can we do here in the county. And the other thing I'll say is, if you have questions, because I saw a hand there.
No, I was just, it's the light that was going.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
If you have questions while I'm moving through this, please feel free to interrupt. You know, just stick your hand up or shout. I would like it to be interactive, and I'll leave as much time as possible for Q&A after. So Ireland's climate resilience, actually, we have one of the founders in the room here, Kari Koski. I only came to this in 2015, in fact, when I was alerted to it. But it's a group of people that got together and said, you know, we need to do something on these islands about preparing for climate change, not just looking for ways to solve for it, because we are going to be impacted. And the islands are a very unique ecosystem and have a unique social structure as well. And so we need to have some kind of tailored answers for this. And the general idea was really to develop a plan that we would kind of offer up to the county. And it's morphed somewhat. We've had a number of different meetings. We have developed one chapter, in fact we're working on a second and possibly a third, in these different sectors of things like water. Was the first one that we did. There's one on terrestrial ecosystems. There'll be one on, you know, health and human services. And what's happened though in the meantime is that the San Juan County Comprehensive Plan update is now in process. And so there's an opportunity for us to weigh in, and I'm going to talk about that again towards the end. But that's the focus of the work right now from the group. And this is just a list of who's currently on the steering committee. And I would say we meet regularly. There's no set date, but it's really as we need to. And we have been invited to contribute towards early suggestions around the overarching framework for the new comprehensive plan. So we've got a meeting coming up in a couple of weeks. And we're always interested in other people who would like to volunteer their time to be part of this network. And as Kari said, and Lovell said, this is a network. It's not, we don't have a 501c3 status or anything. We're working really as a networked organization. But we do have the Madrona Institute as our fiscal agent. One of the biggest challenges actually we found is getting funding to be able to help develop each of the chapters of the strategic plan that we were developing. We've applied to the Community Foundation and I think a number of other grants, and it has been quite tricky to get resources. So if any of you have ideas about that, we would be more than willing to talk to you.
Question?
Yes.
Question. The first slide said what your mission is, and you talked about, it seemed like a reaction to things, network to encourage preparedness. That's kind of a reaction to events.
Yes.
What about influencing those events ahead of time? I mean, in other words, preventing climate impacts in the first place.
It's built into that too.
It is. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think what we found was that the resiliency message is really one that resonates with people. When we keep talking about stopping climate change, everybody kind of backs off a bit. But when you start saying, well, look, we can see that impacts are already in place, and we need to develop resiliency, which means addressing both the reduction of the greenhouse gases, but also preparing ourselves for the impacts that are already baked in. Because the thing about climate change is it's a very long-term trajectory, and the things that we're seeing now are things that were set in motion decades ago. So there's sort of this long tail effect. So unfortunately, there are things that we will see that we can't do anything about until we start to really draw CO2 out of the atmosphere. And I'm going to talk a bit about that too later. So thank you for pointing that out. So I'm sorry, it doesn't show up very well with the light behind, but this just simply says climate change impacts in the Pacific Northwest. And this is really based on UW's Climate Impacts Group have done assessments on what's going to happen in the state of Washington and the Pacific Northwest in general. And so these are the types of effects that we're going to see, and we already are. I mean, if anyone thinks this is a normal year, I don't know. I haven't lived on the island long enough, but it seems to me we've had more rain than has been recorded in many, many years. And I think we're going to see more of that type of extreme precipitation events, as they call them. We also here on the island will see temperature increases and some increased fire risk, although still much lower, obviously, than other parts of the state. Sea level rise is a big one, particularly for people with waterfront properties, and that in turn is going to have an effect on water because of salination of water supplies, particularly in islands like Lopez, which are already facing encroachment problems. And any of you who were at the Water League of Women Voters session would have heard all about that. What we're less reliant on probably is the glacial retreat, because our water sources here are not based on glacial water. However, that does affect energy supply, potentially. And we're not going to be, I don't think, in flood zones, and erosion is less of an issue here, and changing health risks, because we have a slightly cooler climate. But nevertheless, these are all aspects to consider. I do think we'll probably see, and Kari could talk more about this, but we'll probably see an increase in species that don't belong, and that means pests. So that's something for any of you that are in agriculture or gardening, need to keep an eye on. So this is, I'm moving on now to talking a little bit about the political landscape in the state, and I know you're all very tuned into this, but one of the things I think that probably got most visibility was Initiative 732, which was a revenue-neutral carbon tax, and voters voted on that in November 2016, but it got close, but it didn't pass, and I have some comments on that. Then the Department of Ecology put in place a clean air rule, which went into effect in September of last year, and that caps major sources of emissions. It probably covers about 60% of the economy. And it puts a cap, and then it gradually ratchets that cap down. So the entities that are covered have to reduce their emissions over time. And it's currently undergoing legal challenges from at least 3 different entities, one of which is probably, they're all kind of fossil fuel industry based. There are some that are genuinely concerned about their ability to compete if their energy costs go up. But for the most part, it's what we would say business as usual. And right now, there's a word missing there, we have 4 carbon tax bills introduced in the 2016-2017 session. One of them only about a week ago, in fact. And there's also a solar jobs bill, which is important and worth weighing in on. The thing with the carbon tax bills is that they all vary in terms of how much they price carbon at, and then what they do with that revenue. And really voting on any of those or lobbying for any of those depends on your worldview about what would work best. So it's complex. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute too. 732, as you probably know, actually passed in this county, which led us to raise the question, I wonder if we could do it here, just in the county. And in fact, Lopez has a carbon tax, it's voluntary, but you know, that's a starting point. It's something interesting that we could potentially explore here. So it was ourselves and King County that clearly had the most progressive view about this. Now, I don't know if you can read this, but the Nature Conservancy actually sponsored a poll immediately after the election to find out what happened with 732 and what voters thought about it. And one of the things they found out is that most knew relatively little about it at the time that they voted. So that's an important factor. You know, they didn't have a huge budget. There were many places they couldn't get out to talk about what 732 really meant for individual voters. Those in the centre and on the right rejected it by very large margins, and so there's little evidence that the voters in that group found the revenue neutrality credible or appealing, and that was the central premise of 732, was that there would be a carbon tax, but its effect would be revenue neutral because you reduce the sales tax and certain business taxes. And that clearly didn't seem to be mobilizing enough for people that care about those issues. So despite all of the hopes on their side, it didn't resonate. But a number of different studies, including this one, show that voters still want to take action on climate change. They just haven't seen the right formula yet. So we think there's a very good chance that an initiative, if nothing passes in the legislature this session, there will probably be another citizens' initiative. But what it's going to mean is that right and left are going to have to come together a little bit more closely, or at least the divisions even within the environmental community need to be better healed. And it's essentially, as some of you may know, on 732 there was a group of environmental and social justice groups who felt that it wasn't doing enough to deal with some of the issues that they really cared about. And that would be a subject for a whole other presentation. But I have some views from the business side as well, which make it a little more nuanced. So for any of you that do really want to look at these carbon tax proposals and kind of get yourself very informed, one of the things you have to think about is how many entities are actually covered by the tax. You know, is it economy-wide, or have they left certain key sectors out? So that's one thing to think about. $15 to $25 a ton, which is roughly the rate that has been proposed by various different bills, is not enough to meet the goals that the state has already got in place. That price alone won't do it. And proponents will say, well, we raise the price every year. That is probably not enough. If you're just doing it on price alone, you need a price of about $100 a ton of CO2. And then the other thing that we've discovered through some modeling that we've done, and I say we, I'm part of a group called Washington Business for Climate Action. I'm a strategic advisor, and it's a network of businesses that really care about this and want to take action. And we've been doing some modeling, and we found that if you take the revenue, instead of giving it back to the people, which sounds nice, if you actually take it and invest it in solutions, you bring your greenhouse gas emissions down much faster. So that, if you're looking at any of the bills, HB 1646 is probably the best. Either that, or there was a bill that the governor proposed very early on. And then it gets into a whole sort of very, very difficult area when you start saying, what do we, okay, we'll invest in solutions. What solutions? How do you make those choices? And that again, is very, very difficult. And there are lots of people who will be standing there in line wanting that investment in their own projects. So that's a very tough task for any legislature to decide. So moving on to San Juan County, I talked a bit about the update, and we have a schedule here, which I believe is available. Is Lovell still here?
I'm here.
Yeah. Lovell, is that still available on their website?
It is.
Okay. And I'm going to give you a link to the website as well. But basically we're in this phase of March to June 2017, and we have had, Islands Climate Resiliency is actually having some input into the early stages. And we're meeting with them next week, I believe it is. Or at least our group is coming together for some recommendations, then we can put those recommendations forward. With these other stages, you have the council and the planning commission. So there's briefings, hearings, work sessions, and public hearings again. Then there's a whole format for the general public, which is this next layer here. And they plan to have a series of open houses. It looks as though that's going to be July to September, but I suspect the timing of this may slip. And then they have this one that they call stakeholders and interest groups and stakeholder meetings. And that raised my curiosity because I wasn't sure whether this group as an entity would be considered to be a stakeholder group and could potentially have meetings with the county, you know, on your own, not necessarily just as members of the general public. Would I be right, Lovell?
Well, the Islands Climate Resiliency Group just asked to have a meeting with staff at the county about this, and any group can ask. So I say, if you're interested, ask. Yeah. Go for it.
So yeah, if you want to be advocates for this, for having climate change included in the comprehensive plan, I think it would be wonderful if the group could make that known. And this is the website, which I can leave behind afterwards, or if you already have access to this. But this is the link on their website, and you can send comments in as well. Comp plan comments at sanjuanco.com. So lots of opportunities there. And what we're going to try and do with the Islands Climate Resiliency Group is we've taken all the sections of the comprehensive plan, and we're going to try and demonstrate how climate change could be included in each of those, rather than it being just one unit on its own. It needs to be embedded into the whole plan.
Question.
Yes.
Does the state require that counties consider climate change as part of the comprehensive review process? Or do you have to convince our county to do that?
We'd have to convince the county.
Sarah, could you repeat the question, please?
Yes, does the state demand that the counties have to include climate change in the comprehensive planning process? And the answer is no, they don't require it. So we have to advocate for it. Which is why we need as many people as possible doing that. So I had a thought about, you know, what else can we do? There's the whole political advocacy side, but there's also what we can do practically as individuals and as communities. And actually there is a lot we can do, surprisingly. Just this last week or so, in fact I think it was April the 22nd, this book came out called Drawdown, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. And it's based on an idea that Paul Hawken, who is the editor of this, had back in 2001, when he was trying to find out from climate scientists and other experts what it was actually going to take to solve the climate change, you know, to get us to the point where we were drawing down greenhouse gases from the atmosphere to a place where we could start to reverse the effects. And nobody knew, and no one single person had the answer. There was no work going on in that space, and so he said in the end, I wasn't an expert either, so I sort of let it go. But then in 2013, he started to hear some of the really, really alarming figures that some of you may have heard about things like the fact that we're blowing through our carbon budget, the fact that if we keep on this trajectory, we'll move into an era of temperature rises as much as 4 degrees C, which we can't sustain agriculture with that kind of a shift. And so what we're trying to do is keep the rise to at least 2 degrees or maybe even 1.5. And he started to say we need to look at the ways in which we can solve this problem. And so this book is actually the result of over 200 researchers and scientists looking at all the solutions that are out there, quantifying them and modeling them. And it's the most wonderful book because it's very, very positive, very hopeful. And he says in the foreword, he said, you know, climate change isn't a liberal agenda and it's not a conservative agenda. It is the human agenda. We all have to work on this. And so what they've done is they've ranked the solutions from sort of 1 to 100. And this is really difficult to see, and I apologize, but you can go on the website and look at all of this, and I'm going to run you through some of these. But the website is drawdown.org, and if you go on there, it's very interactive. You can read all about it, you can look into different solutions. For those of you that love to read, as I do, the book is just gorgeous. It's like a coffee table book, and it's not difficult to follow at all. In fact, I'm just going to pass this round so you can all take a look. So, one of the things that was most surprising to me, perhaps, was the emphasis on educating girls. I mean, this is the League and Win voters, right? Educating girls is number 6 and family planning is number 7. And when you combine those two, it is the number 1 solution to climate change globally. So obviously that's all to do with population. But they've looked at it in a very different way than we would do normally. The other thing is food. The role of food and agriculture is incredibly important. Reducing food waste, there's a figure that suggests we waste about 1/3 of the food that we produce in the United States. And that has a huge burden on climate. It puts a lot of CO2 into the atmosphere because there's all of that energy that went into producing the food that then is completely wasted. Plus, in many cases, you get methane coming off from landfill if the food is not composted. Another thing that's of interest to me particularly is plant-rich diet, because I'm vegetarian, I was vegan at one point. That has a huge impact on your own personal footprint, as we call it. And then there's a lot around agriculture as well. So even aside from the technologies like solar and wind and the things that we think about when we think about clean energy, there's an awful lot that can be done. Food, there's actually 8 solutions in the book, and all of them are in the top 20. So that's one thing I think that most individuals can really play a part in helping to reduce their own footprint and also encourage people who are doing the right thing. On energy, all the usual suspects like wind and solar farms, which for us here might, offshore turbines, all of that might look a little bit out there, but there's a lot we could do here with our own community, with solar power and even micro wind, ultimately. And then transportation, electric vehicles. I have a little EV. It only has a range of 60 to 70 miles. That's all I need on this island. And then newer cars coming out this year. I think Chevy has an electric vehicle that will do 230 miles, which is more than adequate for most people. They say that actually the current technology would cover about 80% of all transportation needs. You only need the other 20% if you happen to do a long distance journey. And then materials, I pulled this one up because household recycling is in there, but it's still way down the list. But water saving is an important one, because that's something I think everybody here is very cognizant of on this island. And other exciting emerging technologies as well, like new forms of cement. So I just wanted to finish with a list of actions that I thought would be appropriate for this group. And any one of these, or all of them, would be fantastic. So following the bills in the legislature and as voters staying active, the solar bill that I talked about has a real possibility of passing. And if you want solar, if you're thinking about installing some form of solar energy in your home, that's a bill that needs to get passed, because it's all about the incentives. Then the comp plan, weighing in on that at the county level. Supporting girls' education globally. For instance, if any of you are members of the Soroptimists, that's one of their areas of focus. If you're buying a new or a used car now, consider an EV, and they are remarkably inexpensive both to run and to buy second-hand. The value drops quite precipitously after you've had a new one. So you can get them very inexpensively. Supporting expansion of renewable energy through APALCO. We heard from one of the board directors at the Climate March that they announced their community solar project. So there will be opportunities to make investments in solar even if you're not going to put solar panels on your own property. Install a smart thermostat. Something like that can have an incredible make an incredible difference on your electricity consumption and energy consumption, and it does the right thing for the climate as well as for your own bills. Propane and wood burning are not great from a climate standpoint. I know it helps people financially, but I think as we start to see solar become and renewable energy become more part of the grid, those things will seem to be more and more expensive in terms of their overall cost. And there are health issues and risks obviously associated with both of those. Improving our energy efficiency at home. We just got a heat pump installed, a ductless heat pump. We have baseboard heaters, and it's more comfortable, and it made a dramatic shift to our energy bill immediately. So things like that are relatively straightforward, a bit of upfront investment, but the payback is definitely worth it. And then Michael Pollan, who's one of the food experts out there, writes a lot about sustainable agriculture, says, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Or plants, as you say here. And zero food waste, and what you have, compost, which I'm sure we all do. So that was my sort of list of actions for people here in the county. And there are, many others, and the book is a great source of ideas. So that's my formal remarks over.
solar and water heating, because you'll get a faster payback on that than anything else.
Absolutely right.
Spend a lot of money heating our water.
Yes. Beverly said solar water heating. It's a faster payback because we use a lot of energy to heat water. So that's one of the best ways, and actually it's more cost effective, I think, as an option in the short term than doing a whole solar array for the whole house. So any other questions, comments, things you disagree with? Tim?
Paul Hawken, the editor of Drawdown, spoke at Seattle Town Hall 2.5 weeks ago. I heard him. If you Google Seattle Town Hall Drawdown, you can watch his incredible presentation. The book has gone, that day went into its second emergency
Printing?
next printing through Penguin. It's only $22.
Yeah. I thought that was, when it arrived, I expected it to be the size of a regular paperback. And so I was blown away when I saw this, and I think they've probably kind of heavily subsidized it for that price, certainly. And I got myself on the list. I had to have it delivered by Amazon, right? But I got myself on the list so I would get it the day it came out. And so it's exciting to hear it's already in that second phase of publication, Claire.
Do they have it at Spring Bay?
They do. We asked them to get some copies in time for the climate march. And so they do, unless they've sold out, in which case hopefully it's on reorder. And for any of you, I know, Beverly, you're on Lopez. I'm sure you can lobby to get it there.
We get almost anything within 3 days.
Yeah. It really is. It's so accessible, and it's a very positive message as well. Okay.
Palco will, for $25, give you an energy audit of your house, and conservation is often the quickest, fastest, best way to reduce your energy usage before you go to active solar or wind. And then for anybody who likes to compost, I have lots of worms, so just give me a call.
Do you keep those inside there or outside?
I keep them in a box with wire on the bottom to keep rats out.
Oh, I need to talk to you about that, because I used to have worms in Portland, but I was a bit worried about them up here.
Gift of worms to all your best friends.
I'd rather give the book, thank you very much. Has anybody done any more research on the tidal in energy?
Tidal is in the book. Yeah, it's in there, and there are actually a number of different options, I think. Well, there's lots, with all of these new technologies, there's a lot of startup companies that are looking at things, and they don't all make it, but, and there's a lot of research happening in places like Stanford and Berkeley and MIT, so you find a lot of the early stage new energy projects actually start in the universities. And that's another thing, if you're thinking about engagement at a national level in the policy side of things, two things are happening. One is that they're talking about cutting back on the budget for the Department of Energy, which would include a lot of the investments in R&D. And that's a really bad thing. So that's one thing to, lobby and keep an eye about, keep talking to your representatives. We're pretty well represented, I think, here in the state at a national level in Congress. But I've also heard others, like Gretchen Allison said the other week, I'll call congressmen in other parts of the country because I tell them it has an influence on me, and that's very, very true with climate change. The actions of everybody are important. The other thing is that tomorrow, the White House is going to make a decision about whether they pull out of the Paris Agreement. And, light up the White House phone bank I called them all in at night. I got voicemails, I got all sorts of things. I got one Jared Kushner's assistant, I think, just answered the phone and said, "Oh, hi, this is Kelly or Casey," whatever her name was. I was surprised he didn't get anyone. And it was very informal and very strange. But all of them, you know, the point is to make your voice heard. And they all have emails and phone numbers that you can call. And possibly our only chance.
This is the emails
Oh, great.
and phone numbers.
And the phone numbers, yes. Please, please. I mean, today is the day to do it because tomorrow is when they're making the decision. And honestly, my only hope with that was Secretary of State's really important. So Rex Tillerson, getting a message to him because he does understand. Exxon has supported the Paris Agreement. I mean, they talk out of both sides of their mouth, but in general, they smell the coffee. They know the way the world is going. So Secretary of State, and then actually Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, because they seem to be the ones that have more influence, you know, knowing the whims of the president, reaching them. And Ivanka Trump has actually, when she first was out, I think it was just after the election, she said that climate change was one of the things that she was interested in helping to move the discussion along so it wasn't quite so negative. So that's the one thing you can do today. Yes.
As you work with the planning department, the county council, excuse me, to influence the comprehensive plan process and what is included and not included, we have a history in this county of when we updated the critical areas ordinance, the shoreline master program, maybe others in the past, where it was really polarized. The property rights people organized an effort to influence, and they were very effective. Influence not only the outcome, but also the outcome of elections for county council. Do you think this can be done, what you're trying to do, and influence the comprehensive plan in such a way that we don't have those divisions and we can get the property rights side, the conservative side to back whatever you're trying to do, make it a non-political or non-partisan issue? Is that part of your program?
Well, that would certainly be the goal. I think, you know, I go back to what Paul Hawkins said, you know, this isn't a liberal agenda or a conservative agenda, it's the human agenda. So if we can make it relevant to them in a way that doesn't point fingers and attach blame and tries to bring the group together. I mean, there will always be 10%, roughly, who are in what we call the climate denial camp, who just don't think anything's happening. But there's a very large majority in the middle who see changes and understand we have to address them. And providing we're not infringing on property rights to high levels of it, you know, extreme levels, it shouldn't be an issue. I think, you know, the development side is probably going to be where it's most contentious, where people say, are you going to allow me to develop near the shoreline? Well, we've already had that debate for other reasons. But, you know, it's their risk in the end. I mean, if they want to undertake that kind of Russian roulette by building on shorelines that might not exist in 2 decades, it depends how much of that the county has to suck up in terms of costs. But I think that the thing is we go in with the intention of this being something that everybody can agree to, and we have to find ways to make it appealing. There has to be a business reason.
Do you see that side, the reactionary side, organizing the way you're organizing already? I mean,
I haven't seen it, but Lovell.
You know, I think first of all, for the League of Women Voters, for any issue you're interested in addressing through the comprehensive plan, it's great to get your ideas into the draft at an early stage, because often if you wait to speak up until there's actually hearings taking place and there's a formal hearing draft that the council's considering, it's really hard to make changes at that point. So it's great to get ideas in initially. In terms of contention in the community, a lot of the comprehensive plan are goals and policies, and there's not a lot of teeth to it. I think the more contentious aspects of the current comprehensive plan update will be in the area of land use in terms of zoning. So there are going to be people advocating to have properties rezoned and the neighbors don't want it, or, you know what I mean? That kind of thing I think might be the contentious piece of this update process, but the shoreline master program has already been updated, that's done, the critical area ordinance is done. So a lot of what we're looking at are things like the housing element and the transportation element, and there are aspects of the elements we're looking at where you can include goals and policies that relate to climate change, but I don't see that as being the contentious issues that we'll be facing this time around.
And Lovell obviously has a deep amount of experience in this, which I don't have. You know, I have, as they say, enough knowledge to stuff an olive with.
Could I ask Lovell if she'll talk about two comment letters that are coming up, one today and one...
So,
Do you need the mic, Lovell? Or
I'll come up. So, thank you. So, and this totally relates to climate change, but the Tesoro refinery in Anacortes has a proposal to manufacture and export xylene. And xylene is a highly toxic petrochemical, and it's not currently being produced at our local Washington State refineries or transported through our waters. And the comment deadline is actually today. And I have a handout here I'd love to pass out. If people are interested, you can call, you can email, you can send a letter as long as it's postmarked today.
About 10 o'clock. 10 p.m.
Well, you can call by 11:59 p.m.
Oh, I read 10 p.m.
That's the federal one, because it's East Coast time. Anyways, today's the day to get comments in, and this proposal didn't adequately address issues related to vessel transportation and impacts in general. One specific issue is our ferries. They talk about disruptions in our waterways of up to 3 days as if, well, that's no big deal, but in our islands, our grocery stores get everything from the ferries, and they only stock about 2.5 days worth of food. So it would be a huge disruption for islanders if we didn't have ferry service for even 3 days. But it is about, this is one of those just transitions issues. People in Anacortes, some people support it because it would bring new family wage jobs to the community. And yet it's for producing a product that hopefully is not going to be in demand in the long term, because we're transitioning away from, xylene is used in the manufacture of plastics. And hopefully we're transitioning away from that, and we're transitioning away from products produced from fossil fuels. So there's that opportunity. And then the other one is on Thursday, there's a deadline for commenting on a federal rulemaking with regard to anchorage locations. And some of them are in Skagit County, right near the Vendovia Island Preserve, the Jack Island Preserve, which are both owned by the Preservation Trust. And many of you may have participated in that fundraising campaign to buy Vendovia Island. But there's a lot of issues with that. But anyways, I have handouts with all the information there, so thanks.
I was going to pass that around. I seem to remember xylene was used as a cleaner as well, because in the footwear industry, they make rubber and foam and things like that, and everything has to be very, very clean before it's all sort of glued together. So one of the first things that we did is work to find alternatives to chemicals like that for cleaning, because they were creating a huge hazard for people working with them. So I also wonder about the impacts of escaped vapors. Like, was anything being said about that at the site? if they're manufacturing it, whether there's a potential impact from emissions.
Yeah, I mean, they do talk about it. As you may recall, in 2010, Tesoro, that was the refinery that had that huge explosion where 7 workers were killed. And they don't really talk about whether they've adopted the lessons learned from that horrific tragedy to make their workplace a very safe place and can take on the production of this product. Because it is highly toxic, like you say.
Okay, well, if there are no other questions, then that is the conclusion, I think, for me, for my remarks. And Beverly?
One more thing you could talk, and maybe not talk about now, but to add to this list is the acidification
Ocean acidification, yes.
and the shellfish industry.
Yeah, that should be really on our impacts, my impacts pictures. What Beverly's talking about is ocean acidification as an issue, and I don't know if you're all aware of it, but basically the oceans are a sink for CO2, just like forests are. But unfortunately, unlike forests, they don't metabolize it in that sort of really healthy way. And it's creating a more acidic environment for a lot of our shellfish, starting with the very bottom of the food chain and pteropods and things that feed our salmon, things that feed our whales, the marine whales anyway. And it's particularly critical at the moment for a lot of the oyster farmers around in the region. And there's a big part of Washington Business for Climate Action includes people who are working on this topic. There's an organization called Global Ocean Health, and Taylor Shellfish has been very, very vocal on this. So that's something else to take into account. What we can do about that, again, it's the advocacy piece, because we can't do much to change the outcome at the moment. Thank you for raising that, Beverly. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.